Bula everyone. Thanks for logging in. Noa'ia everyone. So, bula everyone. Bula Marietta Nopanga. So, bula to everyone in Rotuma. Mule mosi, mule. Bulatina Croca, Sophia. Miss Marietta Regamoto. Bula Miss Marietta Regamoto, Bula Vinaka. Nakavakalevu, Vinaka, everyone. Nakavalevu for logging in today, wherever you are logging in from Fiji. And I can see there's quite a few logging in from Australia and the United States. So Vambula Vinaka Sarchugan to everybody. Vambula Talenga Vikim Nina Sematiko Mai Nisilandi, and also some mostly from Suva and Nandi and Lautoka. So thinking of all of you in Fiji right now, I understand that there's a lockdown happening there right now. So we are thinking of you and hope that everything will be contained and everyone will be safe in the next couple of days and weeks and months to come. Vinaka vakalevu Sara. So this week has been started on a high with Tupe Solomon Tanawai coming over on Monday, And then we have Mrs. Marietta Ringamoto, Vinaka, Mrs. Ringamoto for coming over last night and being our guest, sharing your life growing up in Fiji and visiting Rotuma as well. So since this week is our Rotuma week, and we're featuring Rotuma, we are very blessed today to have a special guest who visited Rotuma as a researcher and as an archaeologist. And at the moment, he is a professor at the University of Auckland in Aotearoa. And so we are really blessed that he agreed to our humble request for him to come in today and just to Talanoa and share his experience of going over to Rotuma, and he will be sharing some of his memories as well when he was there, and some of the interesting findings as well on the research that he undertook when he was there. So at this moment, I would like to say Bula Vinaka and Noa'ia to you, Professor THEGN LADEFOGED. Bula Vinaka, THEGN.
Hi, Axia. Thank you. Thank you for having me here this evening.
Yes,
Real honor and privilege. Thank you.
Yes, you're most welcome. I'm just, when we were putting together this program, Professor THEGN, I was remembering when we invited you and Professor Ethan Cochrane over to the Center for Pacific Studies a couple of years ago when we celebrated the Fijian Language Week at the Fale. And I still remember the day very well. Most of us who were there were very touched and very privileged, I should say, that both of you who have written so much in terms of research and archaeology in the Pacific, and both of you came over to Fiji and you were right there on campus. And so in my mind, I was thinking, you know, sometimes, you know, we don't spend time to actually look across the street or look across to the next building, right? And find out, I wonder who's there, or maybe, you know, we could invite and talk to them. And so when I sent you the email to you both and Ethan, when you both agreed to come, I was, you know, very happy. I was amarau. And then when we were planning the Rotuma week this week, I was like, there's someone I know I'm gonna find and see if he can come and talanoa to us. Yes, so Vinaka vakalevu sir, Professor THEGN for being here with us today. And so perhaps to start off our talanoa, would you be able just to tell us a little bit about yourself? Just your family and your background and the different places where you actually work in.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. I was actually born in England, but my father was a linguist, studied African languages, and so he got a job at UCLA. So when I was very young, 3 years old, we moved to Los Angeles, and so I really grew up in Los Angeles. And you know, obviously, I'm an American. I feel culturally very American, which is quite funny because I've lived in New Zealand now far longer than I ever lived in Los Angeles. I came to New Zealand in '93, so I've been here, you know, almost 30 odd years.
Yeah,
long time it seems like. But yeah, I went to universities in California for my undergraduate degrees. And I really didn't get into archaeology until almost after I finished my BA degree. I was studying cultural anthropology, and then in my very last year, I took an archaeology field school in the summer after I graduated, actually. And I thought, oh wow, this is fantastic. You know, I wasn't really suited to doing anthropology. Talking to people wasn't really my thing. So I thought it would be much better to do the archaeology. And I did a field school up in Colorado, and then was doing contract work for about 2 years after my BA. and then figured out, oh, I could combine doing archaeology and my other sort of passion or love of surfing. I could combine that with surf and go to university in Hawaii. So then I did my graduate work at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. I started there in '84, I think it was, and I was there for about 10 years. Yeah.
Wow, I love that combination.
Yeah.
When it includes surfing in it, why not? Yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, growing up in California and then doing the archaeology, what I would do is in the summertime, I would go to Utah and Wyoming and do contract work. And then in the winter, when it was snowing there, I would go to Hawaii and I'd surf. And so I did that for about 2 or 3 years, and then figured out, oh, no, I should just go live in Hawaii and do archaeology. So that's how I sort of got into archaeology. And when I first got there, Professor Matthew Spriggs was there, and he was my MA supervisor. And so I sort of did my MA on Hawaiian, actually quite close to you, Hawaii volcanoes area. Did some work there for my MA, settlement pattern. And then when I was thinking about my PhD, I was working with Michael Graves and Terry Hunt, and Terry was going to the Yasawas. And so I was actually originally going to do my PhD work in the Yasawas. And I went to the Yasawas with Terry and about 4 or 5 other of his students, and had a fantastic time for about, I was only there for about 4 or 5 weeks, but for one reason or another, it didn't work out for a PhD there. So I had to leave there, and I actually came back and was back in Hawaii trying to figure out, well, what if I can't work in the Yasawas, where will I work? And then Alan Howard, a cultural anthropologist who's spent many years in Rotuma and has a great affinity for the island, suggested I go to Rotuma, and I was like, oh, okay. I didn't really, I thought that would be wonderful. So yeah, I kind of changed my research design a little bit. What I was originally going to do in the Yasawas, I didn't change it that much. I was interested in people's social organization and how that changed over time, and that kind of in relationship to resources and that sort of thing. So yeah, I went to Rotuma. The first time I went must have been 1990, something like that. And I was there for about 7 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did my work there, which I'll share a little bit of those results in a second, but just to finish up the story of how I came to New Zealand. I came back and was writing up my research in Hawaii, and a job opportunity came up at the University of Auckland. And I hadn't even finished my PhD. I was very much in the midst of it, but I applied for the job and got the job. And then that was, like I said, almost 30 years ago now. And so I've been in New Zealand since.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm just so pleased that that's that shift from cultural anthropology to archaeology. Interesting to see that shift, which to many people it may be kind of like a natural, kind of shift, or sometimes it's the other way around for some people, from archaeology into cultural anthropology. But when you started going into archaeology, what actually attracted you the most in terms of doing work there?
Yeah, I think it was really 2 things. Because, like I said, I only did 1 course in my BA on archaeology. It was all cultural anthropology, and I finished my degree, and I did a field school course, a 6-week course in Colorado, and it was that whole combination of being outside and doing field work and just the amazing, I was working in the Southwest, so it was on a Sazi sort of culture, and looking at their past and trying to understand that by just being outside is what attracts me personally to archaeology is that combination of doing field work and really enjoying that, but then coming back into the office and then sort of writing it up. And then, you know, the other thing, like I mentioned, I'm just not suited for being a cultural anthropologist. I don't really like people, or I don't want to spend my time talking to people. So by studying the archaeology, I could think about people and I could think about societies and how things changed over time without just having to deal with people, which frightens me. So yeah.
Oh, wow. And I think, you know, there will be some young ones, you know, listening in. There's a few who are commenting in terms of, you know, the journey that, you know, you took, and even coming over here to Hawaii, you know, and the time you spent, because that's 10 years is quite a long time. So you were based in Manoa, but doing your research here on the Big Island?
Well, during that time, it's funny, as you probably know, with your students and yourself, that was to get my MA and my PhD. And it just took me a long time to do my MA and my PhD. I think it took me a long time because I was taking classes and I was doing lots of interesting things in Hawaii. But I was primarily at Manoa, and then in the summer, you know, we would do contract work just to support ourselves. And I got involved with the National Park Service, and that's how it led to doing that study for my MA over on the Big Island. But I was only really over there for, you know, the summer. I was mostly at Manoa. And then for the whole time when I'm sort of planning my research, yeah, I was in Manoa, and then I was in Rotuma for about 7 or 8 months.
Wow.
And then came back, yeah.
And you mentioned, you know, Alan Howard, because he has done, you know, a lot of work in, you know, in Rotuma, and he's retired now, right, from UH Manoa?
Yes, yeah. He was the one who originally, like I said, got me interested in the island, because I hadn't really considered going there. I was going to the Osawas. I went to the Osawas, and it just didn't work out there for me. So I was trying to find somewhere else to go. And Alan was just so enthusiastic about Rotuma, and just, you know, he was trying to not sell me, but convince me to go there. And he just was raving about how wonderful it was and how nice the people were. And he's like, you know, if you go there, you will just have the best time, and people will take care of you and be so nice to you. And he's exactly right. I had a very, very, very good time there for that 7 months. Lots of grog, lots of it was wonderful. It was a wonderful time.
Wow, that's wonderful. And in terms of, you know, speaking to Alan, how much of Rotuma that you already know before, you know, that discussion for you to finally, you know, take on the challenge to actually go to Rotuma?
Yeah, very little. Well, archaeologically, Rotuma is a very interesting place because it's sort of on the edge of the initial, excuse me, the initial settlement of remote Oceania when Lapita peoples come out. And everyone always thought, as you find in Fiji and Tonga and Samoa, Lapita pottery and evidence of that first migration out into the Pacific. And so part of what I was looking for on Rotuma was that evidence for that. And I didn't find it. And I think I didn't find it because I wasn't such a good archaeologist at that time. I was just a student. So that was one thing I was trying to find, is early settlement. But really what I was kind of more interested in is not the early period, but the later period, and the whole political system on the island, pre-European contact, and how that political system had changed over time. So Alan was very, obviously, as a cultural anthropologist, very interested in contemporary island life and what was going on there, sort of economically and politically and those sorts of things. And when I was first interested in the island, I mean, I read all of Alan's work on it, and that was, it's very interesting work about education there and the economics and political. But that wasn't really what I was interested in. I was very much an archaeologist. I would say, I would say the one thing now that I'm thinking about it, what Alan pointed out to me is that as an archaeologist, sometimes you're very interested in all the things people leave behind. So the houses, the large monumental architecture, all of those sorts of things. But what Alan pointed out to me is the whole data source, really interesting data of history and people's history through oral traditions and through genealogies. And so my work was really about looking at the genealogies and trying to not match it up to the archaeology, but look at the sort of semblance between them.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think when it comes to Rotuma, as you said earlier, it's interesting to kind of see the connection also to Samoa and Tonga. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that when you're looking at your archaeological research. But what I was wanting to ask you first was arriving in Rotuma. What was the memories you had when you came? Because you visited with another fellow student when you went to Rotuma?
No, I
just you?
went. Yeah, and it wasn't even really with Alan or anything. Alan had been there, I think it was the year before. And to be honest, he was a little tumultuous. And so some people weren't very keen on Alan and other people were very keen on Alan. So I went into the island and I stayed at a house at the government station there. And I had letters of introduction about it. But it was just amazing to me how helpful everyone was. And, my initial reaction was when I got there, I think it was a Saturday, I think that airplane, it was like the once a week airplane that that flies into the island. And it was all very quiet. And I think it was the Saturday or the Sunday, it was the weekend. And I just remember going, where is everybody? And of course, people were going to church and having their meals and having their quiet family time. And, that first week I was there, I just totally remember walking around just going, where is everybody? And I think it took people, a day or so or a week or so or a month or so, well, actually not a month at all, a day or so to warm up to me and realize, who is this strange person over in the government boarding house there? But very quickly, people started to invite me to dinner and invite me to church and invite me to all of their, all of the things that they do. And so my very, very fond memories are the archaeology was really fun, but it was living on the island and just being involved in all of those things.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I can imagine the warmth and the hospitality and the people themselves, plus also the environment. I've seen pictures, of the actual, the island and the beautiful beaches and the ocean. So it must have been, a very memorable time that you spent there. What about the food? What was the food like for you?
Yeah, it was wonderful. Are you kidding? It was great. It was fantastic. Yeah, all the feke and puddings and it was really, really good. And of course, being the outsider, the guest on in there, people were very just hospitable and just invited me to all sorts of dinners and just really looked after me. So yes, I gained quite a few pounds when I was there.
I was gonna ask about that, but I'm glad you said it in terms of gaining some extra pounds.
Yeah.
And just this morning when I was sharing this moment, I was sharing with some of the Rotuman friends about you coming over to talk to us. There's a particular person who's online at the moment, Hani Semao Mauricio, and he just told me that over the weekend he was reading your work. He's doing some studies, and and then he saw my post, and he was like, "What? Is he really coming to talk to us?" So, and he's online at the moment. So, Vinaka Hani Semao. So I'm glad that you're watching, and Professor THEGN is right here. Because I think Professor THEGN, he thought it must be like a joke or something, because he couldn't believe reading your work and then saw my post saying that you're actually going to be speaking to us. So Vinaka for that. So now, Professor THEGN, in terms of the archaeological work, what were some of the highlights of the work that you did on Rotuma?
Yeah, well, I've been to the island 2 times. So I went in 90, I think it was, to do my PhD work. And then I went back in 96 and did another little excavation. It's obviously a place, or not obviously, it is a place that's very dear to my heart. I mean, it's where I really started to become an archaeologist in some very real senses there. And I've only been there twice. And most of my research actually is about Hawaii and Rapa Nui, Easter Island, and about Aotearoa. And it's kind of a regret of mine that I haven't been back again. But there's still time. There's still very much time. But in the first time I went, I was interested in the whole political system. And it was really in the second time I went where I was looking for the early settlements. And we found a few things. Maybe I should just share a few pictures.
Yes, you can do that.
Yeah, let me see. Okay. And is that showing now?
Yes, it's showing.
Okay, it's just the screen. You don't see my other screen or anything. You just see the one screen?
Yes, just one.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Great. Yeah. So as I said, when I first went to the island, people were so very welcoming. And in particular, Fuata and his family were just so incredibly welcoming. Fuata Kamo was the postmaster in the home. And so when I first went there, he was one of the first people to really invite me into his family and just, welcome me in. And the other person that I worked with a lot is Wafa'o. And he was very much the historian on the island. So Fuata, as I said, and his family, this is just a picture of him and his wife Malu and their children, and I think Malu's sister there, were really welcoming me in. And that, of course, involved going to church. I was raised actually quite religiously. My mother was very religious. And so going to church was just natural for me. I'll just show you a very blurry picture of a much younger of self.
Oh, you look really nice with your sulu. That's really nice.
Going off to church there with Fata. So a lot of my time was spent with Fata and his family, but it was also a lot of my time was spent with Bafa'o. And he was really the person who almost, I'm not exactly sure how it came to be, but he was, someone told him to look after me, or he was the historian. And he had just a wealth of knowledge about the island and the oral histories of the island and many of the interesting places on the island, and was just so generous with that knowledge. And taking me around the island. A lot of our time was spent doing this in the post office. And you can see Buffalo reading the newspaper there, and the postmaster in the background, and Lemeke, the police officer, is in this picture too. So I do have to say that I was on the island for about 7 months for my PhD work. And I now in hindsight reckon that if it wasn't for all of the celebrations and parties and all the wonderful things of life on the island, I probably could have done my field work realistically in about 3 weeks. And, but that 3 weeks and the gathering of the data turned into about 7 months of listening to stories from Buffalo and researching some interesting places. So that was the first time I went. And I went back again in '96 and just did a very small excavation right by Buffalo's house. That's his house that you can see there. And in Itamuta. And this excavation was, again, to try and look at some of the early material and early occupation of Rotuma. And it was just in the bay there, right beside Buffalo's house. And we just did these small excavation units that you can see there. And we came up with some really interesting sort of results. And those results date to around 600 to 800 years at the bottom. And then there were kind of two different, there was the bottom level and the topper level, which was around 1,000 years old. So in the bottom level, you can see some of the pendants there. Those are dog teeth pendants that we found, and some fish pendants that we found there. But we also found a lot of, as you would imagine, it's right beside the lagoon there, we found a lot of fish remains.
Right.
When we had gone back in '96, I brought one of my students, Jonathan Wall, with me, and we did this study in the publications here, and I can, send that reference to you. But it was looking at the fish, something that when I was on the island, I did a little bit of. I'm not going to say I'm a good fisherman at all. I think people started laughing. The one time, the picture on the left there, you could see someone bringing up one of the fish when we were out fishing. And you could see the clouds in the background, and the rain there was coming in, and it started to rain. And for some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason I had my umbrella out on the boat. And so I think, I'm huddling under this umbrella, and everyone's just laughing at me. Anyway, so I don't think I cut it quite as a fisherman, but in the archaeological remains, we did find a lot of fish remains. And it just showed a kind of an interesting pattern over those two different time periods that I referred to. The earlier fish remains of what people were eating and exploiting were really from the outer reef zone, and whereas the material from the top of the excavation was from the inshore, more lagoon species. And we sort of interpret this in a number of different ways about habitat change, or perhaps people had overfished or had depressed the resources on the outer reef, and now we're starting to change. Or it could have just been changes in dietary preferences or something.
Wow.
So that was one of the kind of interesting things that we see this changes in what people were doing, eating and subsistence over time. And the other thing that we found there, and we wrote about this in just this other small article here, was about some pottery. And the pottery is very interesting in Rotuma because there's not a lot of pottery there. It's not like when you walk around the Yasawas or Veitalanoa or wherever in Fiji, there's pottery on all the beaches. There's pottery all over the place. In Rotuma, there's not a lot of pottery at all. In fact, none had been found. And so we found this pottery, and we did some sourcing of the pottery. And the way this works is you just look at the what the pottery is made out of and the rocks that had been incorporated into the clay to make a temper so that when you fire the pot, it doesn't crack. And so you analyze the temper, and what we found was that that temper, what the pot was made out of, must have actually come either from Fiji or perhaps from Tonga. It's a little, probably Fiji, but there is a possibility that it was Tonga. But in any case, it was this exotic pottery that we found. So it just kind of shows the connections, if you will, between Rotuma, which is quite isolated, way up to the north there of Fiji. But of course, that distance was nothing for people who actually have good canoes and know how to sail. And so there probably was quite a lot of interaction. And of course, the kind of oral traditions and sort of genealogies and stories, and this is what Pakoa was so good on, told us about, was more about the political system and the socio-political system. And what I was interested in is the political system before Europeans got there. And there's been a bit of work on this in terms of that system. And you can certainly see the influence of Tonga and the influence of Samo in Rotuma, both in the language and in customs and any number of things, which I'm sure people listening to this know far more about than I do, to be honest. So you can see that influence. And what I was kind of interested in was looking at the pre-contact political system. And I did a lot of research on what that system was in terms of the island-wide leadership. So there were these island-wide leaders, the Mua, which gets glossed as kind of a priest of the island, spiritual priest, and associated with the founding population. And then these other roles of Sao and Fakari, and then other district chiefs and then other folks on the island. So I won't go into too much detail about this, but I'll just say that we studied it in a number of different ways. I looked at the archaeology and some of the monumental architecture, and there's a very distinctive burial type that you see in Tonga, the Langi burial mounds made out of the coral cut reef that's brought inland and then build these mounds. And you can see these mounds in Rotuma. I'm sure people on the island know very well of this. And it's kind of evidence of this, it's evidence of this contact with Tonga that's taking place. And so we looked a little bit at that. There's a couple of very famous burial places, the burial place of the Sao, Sicily, that we looked at and did some brief mapping of. And then we also looked at this place deep in the bush of Oinafa, I believe it is, in the district of Oinafa. Sicilo, I think, is in Noa'ia. The Kinehe'e is in Oinafa. And this is just this huge platform that, as you can see the little diagram in the bottom there, and the scale is 20 meters. So, it's about 60 or so meters across, maybe 3 or so meters high, all constructed with these very nice pathways, roads coming into it. And there's some legends around this of how the newcomers to the island defeat the original occupants. And there's a lot of sort of legends around that place and other places. So what my work was doing, just to kind of wind it up here, because I don't want to go into too much detail. I'm happy to go on and on about it, but what my work there was doing, I wrote another little article about this, was looking at the leadership and how that position of the Sao wasn't a rotational position. Alan Howard and other people have said, oh, the sow rotates from district to district.
Mm.
What my analysis of the genealogies kind of showed is that's not the case. By far more often, these leaderships were coming from the eastern side of the island. And it shows that the eastern side, as people from the island know, is very much associated with chiefly activities and indeed associated with Tongan influence on that side. And the kind of not strange thing, but the very interesting thing is I also did a productivity analysis of the island, a geographic information system analysis of it, and showed that that eastern side was far less productive than the western side. So it's interesting that really many of the leaders of the island are coming from this less sort of productive side of the island. And I wrote this article about that and how that system plays out in relationship to the resources. I think I'll stop there unless you would like more detail, and I'm happy to give you that. But yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Wow, that's amazing. I just love to. I'm sure there's a lot of our Rotumans listening in tonight, and this can add more, to their memories and also their understanding of what happens, back in in Rotuma. And also those photos are really, really awesome with all the families that looked after you. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was wonderful to look through those pictures again. It really was. It makes me sad that I haven't been back more recently and more determined. I really just need to.
So now maybe after you've spoken to us on this platform, we might apply for some grants and we can head to Rotuma. Yeah. That's wonderful. Wow, I just love to. I was looking at the map about the exotic pottery, and I always kind of, you have Tonga and you have Vitilevu or Bonolevu, and then I also noticed Uve and Futuna. Was there any mention of Uve and Futuna in any of their stories in Rotuma?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I mean, of course, there's a very well documented influence of Tonga out into the Pacific and the Tongan maritime state. And essentially, Tonga in the 14th or so 15th century is starting to expand out and expand the political influence. And that extent goes as far as Niua Tapu and really Uvea and Futuna. And interestingly, not to the same extent as Rotuma. So Rotuma was never really part of that maritime chieftainship or maritime state. And the question of why, whereas Uvea is fully integrated into it, and Rotuma not nearly to the same extent. However, I did say, you see traces of the Langi burial mounds. There's traditions about Tongan chiefs and that sort of thing. But according to the traditions, it was never really part of that Tongan Empire in the same way. Wow. So there's definitely interaction going on, and of course, after even later, the interaction with Samoa and in the relationships there, I think.
That's wonderful. This Sunday we'll be hosting Professor Paul Garrity from USP, who will be coming in to talk about the Rotuman language. So that will be interesting because that will be somehow connected to some of the work you're doing.
Yeah, very much so. I will join. I would love to hear this. Yeah. Paul's work. And yeah, he's very interesting in terms of Rotuma is a fascinating language because I don't know what he's going to say more recently, but I know his earlier work was all about how Rotuma was a language that separates off relatively early. And there's interaction that's going on far more between Samoa and Tonga and Fiji, and Rotuma is that isolate early on. But that'll be fascinating. I can't wait. I'd like to hear more.
Yes, absolutely. So just very interesting, to see the work you're doing in terms of archaeology, and to see Alan's work on cultural anthropology, and then to also link it to the language. That just makes Rotuma very interesting. I like what the slide that you showed. Why was Rotuma never colonized by Tong? And that's always sort of like the big question, as you've just mentioned earlier. And you mentioned about the distance. Is the distance between Tonga and Rotuma an issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just far enough outside of the sphere of sailing that Uvea and Futuna are within that sphere, but it was just far enough out. And what Tongans were doing is establishing these outposts that would be providing goods and services and wives and people and relationships, and with these other islands. And I think for one reason or another, Rotuma is just outside of that sphere, just on the edge of the sphere. And it's very interesting to me how the stories of Rotuman leadership, traditional leadership, do have this element of Tongan influence, but it's always still Rotuman leaders within the island. And it's almost like they use the influence of Tonga as a source of power, and I'm sure there are elements of that, or I'm not sure. I suspect that there were elements of that going on in the ancient past. And it was never to the extent where Tonga had set up and were completely controlling the island, Rotuma. But there were elements of, Tongan outposts on the island, or influence.
Wow, that's
amazing. It's very, very interesting.
Very interesting. I've got another question, Professor THEGN. Was there anything interesting you also found through, the influence of women? In terms of, because you're talking about leadership, were there any women leaders or who took some leadership in your research that you found?
No, I don't. I mean, archaeology is a very coarse-grained enterprise, and we study processes at kind of a coarse-grained general sort of story, and the way that we can get at more specific understandings is by using oral traditions and by using languages and using that. And my research wasn't specifically looking at women and the role of women on the island. So no, I just really don't know too much about that today. So sorry to say.
Wow, that's okay. That's okay, because I think it'll be interesting as well to look at Alan's work. And maybe I can ask Paul too on Sunday. Because I always like to kind of see the influence of women in our area of looking at prehistory. And interesting to see the Langi, those Langi sites, because in 2000, what year did we go? With Dr. Christophersen from New Caledonia. We were doing excavations in Vikumbia, and we were on our way to Taveuni, and we stopped by Nangelelevu Island, which is in the Ringgold Isle between Vanolevu and Taveuni. And I think what we found there as well was those slabs. Yes.
Yeah, it's a very common sort of style, and particularly on Tongatapu, you see them really just, it's monumental architecture at its time. It's very, very interesting.
And you also, you've done a lot of your work in Rapa Nui. You've done your work in Hawaii as well as in Aotearoa. Looking at all those islands, is there something you can compare or something that makes Rotuma unique when you're looking at Rapa Nui or Hawaii or Aotearoa?
Yeah, yeah, it's. I mean, it's fascinating to me to think about those comparisons. And of course, as you know, living in Hawaii now, on the Big Island is big. It's a big island, you know. You know, it's a very big island, and Veitalanoa is big. Those are big land masses. Rapa Nui is a much smaller island, probably not too far off of what Rotuma is. And Rapa Nui is also quite isolated, just like what Rotuma is isolated. I would say that Rapa Nui is probably even a bit more isolated than Rotuma. So the kind of processes and things that go on there in terms of people's way of lives and the way that they organize themselves in the political systems there. It's really interesting to see. In Hawaii, you just have huge populations. I mean, some estimates are as much as 1 million people pre-contact. Other estimates, that's on the high side. Other estimates are, more on around the 400,000 people, but that's still a lot of people. And when you have those people, it just gives some of those people the opportunities of aggrandizement and really to get higher levels of social stratification. And I think on Rotuma, it was a much smaller island that undoubtedly had a very much smaller population. Population is very hard to estimate, so I won't venture to guess how many people, but in the thousands of people, not even probably in the tens of thousands of people. And as such, it is such a smaller island with relatively isolated things are going on there with some interaction from outside, but not a whole lot of interaction from outside. And I just think that didn't give people the opportunity to create those social distinctions that you see in Hawaii. And the level of inequalities and state level society that Hawaii is so renowned for. I don't think those levels of inequalities took place on Rotuma to the near, to the same extent. So it's interesting to look at the resources on the island and then differences in resources. And as I said, my work kind of really showed there is a big disparity between the east and west of the island. And those disparities between the east side having lower productivity and the west side having higher productivity on Rotuma kind of somewhat map onto what you find in Hawaii, where you have the windward-leeward dichotomy. So on Rotuma, it's not so much windward-leeward, it's about the age of the volcanic flows. The geologic flows are very young on the east side on Rotuma. But on the Hawaiian Islands, you get this real dichotomy between the windward sides, which are very highly productive, can grow taro, versus the leeward sides. It's just rain-fed agriculture. It's more about kumara or sweet potato production. And very interestingly, in both Hawaii and Rotuma, it's the upstarts in these more marginal areas that are so involved in warfare and involved in trying to elevate their social position, and in many cases are successful. So where you would think that it would be the more productive side that become the leaders of these, in the case of Hawaii, states, or in case of Rotuma, chiefdoms, it's actually quite the opposite.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Wow. And interesting that you mentioned about warfare.
Mm,
What was some, did you find any, interesting findings that connects to that?
yeah, I mean, I did again an analysis on the oral traditions, and
Right.
what I found is a lot of times in the traditions, um, how it was spoken about
Mm.
is how the giants from one side of the island came over to the other side and ate the people on the other side of the island, or um, how yeah, and what I think those oral traditions are about are very metaphorical.
Mm.
And so I think what they're really talking about there is how the chiefs on one side of the island come over to the other side of the island and eat the produce of those of that side. So my analysis of the oral traditions was not so much in terms of strict history, but it
Mm.
was trying to look at some of the processes that are being metaphorically spoken about during in those traditions. And so I did a small analysis of those traditions, and it was just very, very clear that Noa'ia and Oinafa were involved in much more warfare than Itamuta or Itutia. Um, and, Malhaha and Peche, and the more southern districts were kind of in between. And so it's, or in Chuchu, it's kind of in between. So it was this analysis of the oral traditions that kind of talk about structural processes that are going on there in terms of the warfare. And we saw, well, yeah, I saw some interesting patterning in that. It kind of backs up the notion of the East being the leaders involved in more warfare, so trying to use that as one means of bolstering their power.
Wow. Okay, very interesting. So I'm sure there are friends who are listening in from Noatau and Oinafa
Yeah. Uh,
uh, that would,
it almost makes me, I'm just an archaeologist who doesn't really actually know much about it. And I'm sure that people there know so much more about it than I do. I really,
yeah, and I think, in terms of your role as, as an archaeologist, it would, the opportunity to find archaeological evidence, and then at the same time, I'm glad with your cultural anthropology training, allows you to also include the oral history. I really want to thank you for that, because I think in terms of archaeology and working in Oceania, in the Pacific, including the oral history of the indigenous people there, it adds value to the research that you are doing. That's wonderful.
yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
mean, there's many good, interesting scholars. Kehau Chikola Abad works in Hawaii, has done some really fascinating work on genealogies and oral traditions in Hawaii. So yeah, it's a wonderful
Mm.
source of information.
Wow. No, that's wonderful. And I think what you just said now is going to encourage many of us, the Rotumans and the Fijians who are listening in tonight to value our old stories, right? To value our chants, value our dances. What would be an advice you would maybe give to our young? There's a lot of our young Rotumans even listening in tonight. Bula Vinaka, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and listening to myself and Professor THEGN. Any word of advice you would give to our young ones listening in terms of valuing our oral history?
Yeah, well, I mean, about valuing oral history, I think that it's an amazing resource that is really precious. And
Yes.
um, I think that it's really important for people to understand and to think about and interpret and use their oral history. And I also think it's very generous of people to share that with others, like myself, and allow us to use that data. So I I think around the oral traditions, and my advice to younger people, it's more word of thanks than advice. And it's thank you for sharing those. And I think that, by sharing that, you and preserving it and caring for that knowledge, I think that you'll, gain a lot and really will be able to kind of make a contribution. Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. No,
I
you
mean,
absolutely.
my advice to young people to become an archaeologist, always for people to come be an archaeologist, is that
Yes,
at the
please go.
moment,
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
it's just, I just think it's, for me personally, obviously I've been doing it for a while now, and it just is, I find it really fascinating. And for me personally, as an outsider to the Pacific, it's not my culture that I'm studying, it's not my ancestors' culture, but I still find it incredibly interesting. And I just think for people from the Pacific to have that special connection to be able to study their own past. I mean, my past is Danish, and I don't really know much about that, but to have that opportunity to study your own past in archaeology, I would just really encourage people to, if you want to take that road, if you want to take that path, then I think there are some opportunities there. And I guess the way, to do that, of course, as a profession, starts with the university and just seeing whether you like it, and then talking to people like yourself, Lucy, and myself, professors there at the university, who I think will really help you. So my advice to younger people thinking about doing archaeology or anything at university is just don't be too shy. Your professors are more than happy. And in fact, it's one of the best parts of our job to talk to people about it. So yeah, I would say if you're at the University of Auckland, I would be more than happy to speak with you. So yeah.
Oh, wow. Look at that. To our listeners who are listening in, if you live in Auckland or in Aotearoa, remember Professor THEGN is actually teaching at the University of Auckland. And I really want to say thank you and Faxia to you, Professor THEGN, for just giving that encouragement and having that open door policy. And you're absolutely true, where they should not be shy and ask questions and come and see you if any of our young Rotumans or Fijians who are interested to take up archaeology. Yeah, talk to us. You can send me an email or also talk to Professor THEGN. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if you're not in Auckland, I'm very happy if you'd like to send me an email. Yeah, and we can chat. Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. Wow. See, there you go. For those of you who are listening in, don't be shy. Send an email, ask questions, and remember what Professor THEGN has done when he was, still young. He changed field from cultural anthropology to archaeology, and that's normal. Yeah, that's normal. Well, that was pre-COVID time, but now during COVID time as well, changing profession, that's something that it's normal for many of us today. So, and I think the one thing that we're learning today is, being open and ask anyone for advice. And many of us who work in universities, as Professor THEGN said, that's the best part of our job. When we hear a knock on the door and a student is standing there and wants to talk to us. Yeah. Wow, well done. So to conclude our Talanoa today, I actually didn't want to conclude it. It's sounding very exciting and so lovely to talk with you, Professor THEGN. Is there anything else you want to share? Anything that you didn't mention earlier? Anything about Rotuma? Or if you want to acknowledge or say your Vinaka vakalevu or Faxia to the families that looked after you in Rotuma, this is your time.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just like to say Phyaxia and very much thank you for that hospitality and gratitude that was extended to me. And it was many families on the island when I was there, so long ago. And it does seem like a long time ago, but it's certainly something that a time that I still think about often. So yeah, I would like to very much say thank you to the people of Rotuma, and I appreciate the opportunity to have visited and to have learned about the island and your island. I'd also like to say thank you to you, Teresi, for inviting me here today and to speak. It's really a pleasure. It's actually a real honor to be able to talk. So thank you very much.
Yes, you're most welcome, Thane. We just want to say Vinaka vakalevu to you as well for taking time out from your busy schedule of teaching and research at the University of Auckland. We were very happy and excited when you accepted our humble invitation, and our viewers and those of our Rotuman families that will be logging in after this live will be so appreciative, and express the appreciation to you, for sharing the findings that you have shared with us today. And in terms of contact, if there are some of our listeners that want to contact you, is it okay if I share your email address with them, Thane?
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And I'd be happy to send you copies of those articles that I talked about, or just talk to you about archaeology in general, or any of our other work, or just about, it doesn't have to be about archaeology, about university in general. So yeah, please take care of that.
Oh, Vinaka vakalevu. So for those of you who are listening in, you've just heard Professor Thane mentioning that he's going to be sharing with us some of his writing and his articles that he wrote about Rotuma. And also those of you who need advice for university study, or some of you are contemplating doing further studies during this time, he will be sharing his email as well. I can be able to inbox me and I can share with you his contact. So from all of us, from the islands of Rotuma and also Fiji, we just want to say Vinaka vakalevu to you and all the very best in your endeavors of research and teaching, Professor Thane.
Thank you.
Yes, Vinaka vakalevu, Phyaxia. Manda. Yes, Vinaka. Yes. Thank you so much, everybody. Vinaka vakalevu for listening. Marietta Ringamoto, Vinaka vakalevu. Thierry, to everybody who are listening in, Harrietta Fonmoa, Rosie Rafai from USP, Vinaka vakalevu for stopping by. And we're just so blessed to have Professor Thane sharing his research with all of us. Yeah, Vinaka vakalevu. Yeah. Vinaka. All right, Mother, thank you, Thane. Mother. So don't forget, tomorrow we will be hosting Fesaitu Solomoni. She will be coming in to share about the Rotuman language classes in Auckland, or no, in New Zealand. In New Zealand. Yeah. Yeah. So Vinaka vakalevu for supporting our Rotuman week. So and Friday as well, we have someone as well, Mr. Factofon. Mr. John Factofon will be joining us on Friday. And on Sunday, don't forget Professor Paul Garrity will be joining us on Sunday. Vinaka vakalevu, matili tarangongo. Thank you for watching. Bill Varrea, Vinaka vakalevu, mother Bill. Tanisio Fuata, Yang. Peace. Vinaka Valevu for joining in. I really appreciate it. Hadise Mao Mauricio Vinaka for joining in. I will be able to, share with you Professor THEGN's email. Vinaka Valevu. Join in tomorrow for Fesaitu and Mr. Factopon on Friday. So this is Rotuma Week, and we're appreciating all the time you've given to listen in and celebrate Rotuma. Naka, thank you so much for logging in tonight. I really, really appreciate it. Last night we were honored with Mrs. Marietta Regamoto talking to us in Naka. So Vinaka vakalevu to everybody. I hope that you enjoyed Veitalanoa with Professor THEGN. We're so blessed that he was able to spend some time with us, at least an hour, and sharing with us some wonderful memories of his time spent in Rotuma. And again, we've come to see some of the archaeological research and digging that he did in Rotuma. He went in 1990, he went back in 1996, and he still plans to go back. Now that he's come over on this program, we hope that he can be able to return after COVID-19 goes away. So on this evening, we want to share our love to everyone who's from Rotuma, listening in on this program, and not forgetting our Rotuman families all over the world, as well as those back on the island. I hope that this program will be watched and seen by your families in Rotuma. And so we hope that to invite Professor THEGN to come back again at some point this year, because he's got some more work, I'm sure, other research that he's doing. So if that happens, we will surely let you all know. So again, from our Talanoa with Dr. T team, again, thanking Tupe, Solomon Tanawai, who came on Monday. And of course, last night, we were very honored to have Mrs. Marietta Regamoto. Vinaka Valevu Sara, Mrs. Regamoto, for gracing our table last night and coming in to Talanoa with us. Vinaka Vakalevu and Faixia from our team. And then tonight we have Professor THEGN LADEFOGED. And then tomorrow is Fesaitu Solomone. And on Friday is going to be Mr. John Pactafon. So Vinaka Vakalevu, so from all of us here in Hawaii, I just wanted to say Vinaka Vakalevu to you all and wishing you a very good evening. And I will see you all back tomorrow. Vinaka Vakalevu and Faixia. Nisa mo demanda.